Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Debra Eckerling, author of Your Goal Guide and creator of the DEP method for goal setting simplified. You can't reach your goals on your own, you need your people. So every week I bring together some of my people to dive into the topic of the week for this live show, and it will match on Thursday. It magically becomes an episode of the Deb Show podcast on the Marketing Podcast Network. So whether you're watching us live or the replay or listening to us, we are glad you're here choosing yourself and your goals. And in today's topic, choosing to learn more about courage. And boy, do I have an awesome panel today. We have two FOAs, friends of Annie, Alison Arnoff from Dare2Be Coaching, and Iris Goldfeder from GasStoveCreative, and Rusty Gaillard, who comes to us from our friend Anastasia. So really excited to dive deep. And when Rusty was on a couple months ago, we went on a courage tangent. So of course, we have to do an episode on courage just because that is how we roll on GoalChatLive, aka the Deb Show. So before we jump into the topic, I would love for you all to take a minute to introduce yourself and why you are so excited to dive into the topic today. So Alison, let's start with you. Who are you? Why are you? Well, I know, but other people do too. And why is this topic so meaningful to you?
Well, my name is Alison Arnoff. I'm an executive coach. I'm a 30-year tech industry veteran that decided to be the resource I wish I had on my journey. Felt alone a lot, probably got in my own way a lot. And so now I'm committed to being the resource that I wish I had. If you look at the name of my company, Dare2Be and Courage, they kind of go hand in hand. It was a different name, and we're literally driving down the LA freeway, and I saw a Dare2Be billboard with friends in the car, and I said, I think that's my name. And they're like, yeah, that's you. So I've always known to have a different fear boundary than other people. So Annie nominated me because of my shark diving habit, but to me, that's not courage. And we'll talk about that. To me, my exemplification of courage was I'm a near-death survivor from a few years ago, and I had to take my life back in and out of the hospital for months. And, courage was really finding the will to take my life back. And courage is also watching my clients willing to look at the things that make them uncomfortable or scared and still look at them and do the work to get past them. So this topic to me is just part of my life, and to be able to help inspire others to find that inner courage would be fantastic.
Well, I am glad that you're here, and I'm very excited to dive deeper into this, again, very important topic. Rusty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Deb. Very happy to be here. So I'm Rusty Gaillard. I'm an executive coach. I am in the tech industry, most recently 14 years old, and left Apple about 4 years ago to become a coach. And I just get fired up about courage because I really believe it's one of the most important leadership traits. Because if you don't need courage if you always do the same thing. But the reality is, if you're growing in your career and you're progressing in your career, you're going to have new responsibilities. You're going to be asked to do things that you've never done before, which means there's some risk involved. And that's where courage comes in. Anytime there's risk, there's courage. And so I'm just excited to have a deeper conversation about it, because I really believe it's fundamental to your leadership growth, to your business growth, to your career growth, to your personal growth, to your happiness in your life, your willingness to tackle the things that are a little bit outside your comfort zone, because that's where growth is and that's where fulfillment comes from. So super happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Deb.
And when you have goals, it's because you want your life to be better, different, to get out there. And sometimes you need a little bit more fire to get you going than others, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And sometimes you need a little fire to set the goal in the first place. It's very easy to set the goals inside of your circle of what you think you can accomplish, as opposed to stretching and setting a goal outside of your circle of what you think you can accomplish. Like, oh my goodness, could I be that person who could accomplish that goal? That takes courage, even to consider that as a possibility, and then to decide that you're going to go for it. That takes a lot of courage.
Well, I am all about embracing change, whether it's by choice or by circumstance. And it really starts with having that vision for the future you want and setting the goals to get there, and courage being the fire that gets you started or keeps you going. So, it's a great conversation already. Yay. I love it when that happens. Iris, welcome.
Thank
Please.
you for having me. Appreciate it. Iris Goldfeder, GasStoveCreative. We are all-in-one marketing solutions. We're who you come to when you don't want to deal with 20 different people to get your marketing done. And for me, courage, it's a few things. I also almost died in 2021, didn't realize it until 2022. Well, I got sick from COVID, and my doctor, tell you what it is like a thing, but I didn't realize I was waiting a whole year to see if I would live or not. And in 2022, when he told me, everything was stable and I was okay, I didn't realize I was holding my breath all year. So that was when I started my podcast, and I was like, I'm going all into this thing. But courage is like a few things to me. It's dealing with scaling. It's, just being in business in general takes courage. I mean, everything changes. Nothing stays the same. You don't stay the same. I think fundamentally we stay the same, but I think we go through a lot of different ebbs and flows and changes. And sometimes they can be really scary, and you want to stop, and it takes courage to push through. And it's a big deal. Like you don't realize it until you're like, whoa, I just pushed through that. Oh, now I'm going to push through this next thing. And you just like, keep going.
It's true. Sometimes you don't realize you were courageous until after the fact, right? When you sit down, you take a breath, and you're like, wait, how'd I get here? Well, I got here. Let's keep going.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't, like I wasn't in corporate and I decided to leave. I actually lost my job, and it was like, do I sit home and collect unemployment, or do I do something? So I looked at where I thought there was a hole, and I started my own business. So 10 years later, here we are.
And here we are. And I feel like you all addressed it, but I'm going to ask it again to, put underline and asterisk it. But what is courage? Rusty, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll jump in with that because, I think a lot of people misunderstand what courage is. People think courage is being fearless, and that's actually the opposite. You can only be courageous if there is fear. Like fear has to be present in order to have courage. And so like courage is the ability to, and the willingness to move forward in the face of fear. And so that's really what it's about. And, fear is sometimes a strong word, but, soften it a little bit and say the willingness to take action in the face of discomfort or stress or anxiety, because these are all very common things that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. But are you willing to go have the difficult conversation with the client or with your boss or with with a supplier or your spouse? Are you willing to actually say what it is that you really want, as opposed to saying what you think you can have? Are you willing to change your schedule to align with what it is that you really want? So this is really what courage is. It's about a willingness to move forward, even though it's uncomfortable. To me, I'm so fired up about this because I came to this after leaving Apple after 14 years. It would have been way more comfortable to stay there. But you got to put it in the big context of what's important to you in life. Right. And changing what I was doing the kind of work I am now, helping people to understand what their goals are and then build a strategy to go out and achieve them. I just got fired up by that. And I said, what's more important to me, safety and predictability and a stable paycheck, or going for what it is that I want? And it was going for what I wanted. And it took courage because it was scary.
Yes, I'm nodding for those listening to the podcast. I think we're all nodding here.
Yeah.
Allison, do you want to?
Yeah, Rusty and I have had similar paths, so I'm just going to add to it. So I think, it's courage it's fear, it's doubt, it's exhaustion, it's stress, it's people's voices, it's the internal voices in your head, all of those things that are saying, stop, stay where you are. And courage is saying the desire to go somewhere else is stronger than all those forces trying to keep me where I am. So
Right.
that's why I look at courage is much bigger in the sense of there's so many different forces, but you're saying I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm going to find something inside of me that I don't even know what it looks like yet, what it feels like yet, how I'm going to channel it, where it's going to come from. But I am, and courage, you don't always have to know how you're going to do it yet. You're just going to know you're going to do it, because where you are, the pain of where you are is too much and you don't want to be there anymore. And you are going to find something inside of you that says, I am going forward.
Can I just love that. Could I just add one thing? It's either the pain of where you are or it's a desire for where you want to be. Because sometimes we're all highly motivated by pain, right? When something's really uncomfortable, but we also are human beings are so adaptable, right? Think about the person who moves somewhere and has a 2-hour commute each way.
Right.
I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. People have that. Most of us would be 2 hours each way, 4 hours a day. That's insane, right? That's painful. But if you've done that for 6 months or a year, it just becomes part of your routine and you lose track of how painful it is. So I think part of it is the pain, and that's a huge motivator, but part of it can also be desire. We can be pulled forward by wanting something more.
Well, yeah, because
we're hedonistic by nature, right? We seek pleasure and avoid pain. The avoiding pain one is stronger, as the marketing person can tell us on that, right? But the seek pleasure is still a powerful source. Sorry.
As a marketing person, I don't say avoid pain. I say you have to go through it. That's what I think makes me different. There are a lot of people that are like, no, you want to avoid that. You don't want to go through that. And it's like, no, you have to go through it. I think that's another piece of courage, right? Is in order to get to the other side, you have to go through it. For me, it was, I was here and I saw myself going there and it was scary. And as women, society teaches us that we're supposed to be here. So when we see this and we want to get here, a lot of women do self-sabotage so that they stay there. And I saw where I wanted to be and I didn't shrink. I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm getting there, but I'm getting there. And I did. And I pushed through and I got there. And I remember I had, I think I told Debra this when we were talking on my podcast. I gave myself a weekend to melt down. And actually I called Annie and she's the one who pulled me off the ledge, because it was like, oh my God, I'm scaling and I don't have the things in place. And it was like the scariest thing. And the easiest thing would have been to say, I'm just going to stay right here. This is okay. I don't have to do this. But, it was like, no, it's not okay. I'm pushing through. I'm going to do it. And Monday morning I woke up, and, that was when the rubber met the road. And, I just went, full steam ahead. And it's scary, when you're looking at something that seems so much bigger than you feel that you are at that time. It's very intimidating. And we talk about fear, right? Like how courage, that for me is what it was that I saw something and I didn't know if I was ready to be there or not, but it was time to get there. And I just went, kind of held my breath, pushed through, and here we are on the other side. And it's a lot nicer on the other side. But you have to do it, right? You have to do it.
Yeah, and I'd love to add to that, as a woman in tech, I got a master's in engineering in the late 80s, and I was often the only woman in the room, and most people didn't want me in the room early on. And, the courage was to not listen to their voices and to decide I do belong in the room, and I am valuable, and I am smart, and I might be the smartest one in this room. And I'm not going to let them make me less than because whatever, and it wasn't always like that. I worked with amazing people, but I did have instances of that. And there was the courage to not listen to them and to know what my skill set are, what my gifts were, what my value was, and not letting it be defined by somebody else that for some reason was threatened that I was in the room.
Right.
The point that you all made, first of all, complete agreement. I think this podcast could also be called Fear, but let's stick with courage because that's the more positive spin, which is way more on brand for me. And the other thing that was mentioned by several of you is sometimes it's the voices in your head, but sometimes it's the voices outside of your head. And that's why I'm big. So Deb Method's all about foundation. To get what you want, you need to know what that is. And when you start with that, then you could, realize, okay, maybe this awful situation isn't so comfortable after all. Or maybe status quo just isn't enough anymore. So whatever side of that spectrum you are on, sometimes you just need to take that break, take the breath, take the inventory and say, okay, now it's time.
And I also want to add that sometimes it's the outside voices that get in your head that become the inside voices, right? And you have to combat that as well and say, no, just, out.
You guys may have heard the expression, Jim Rohn, I think, said it and made it famous, that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yep.
And the outside voices made me think of that saying, because if I'm going to go back to my commute example, right? If everybody that you're talking to is commuting 2 hours every day, then it's like, that's just normal in the people you're with, right? Until you meet this person who's like, oh yeah, I have a 5-minute commute. You're like, crazy if that's possible. And so being thoughtful about so talking about foundations, right? Deb's talking about foundations and the Deb method, right? So you're going to set a goal, you're going to try to achieve the goal. Well, pay attention to the people around you. That's got to be a foundational element. Because if the people around you don't believe it's possible, or they say, oh, you're never going to get there, or they're casting doubt or dispersion on you and your goals, that's just going to make it way harder for you. So surround yourself. And sometimes you have to go find people who can support you in this. I had to go find people who were coaches and were good at what they did and had this experience, because I didn't have anyone like that in my circle. So you got to go find someone who's got that experience, surround yourself with them so that you can achieve your goals.
Right.
That's
what I was saying.
I love it when people answer questions before I ask, because what I was going to ask was, what is that first step? And Rusty, that really sounds like a good first step, is to look around you. And if you're not in that kind of encouraging environment, take steps to change that.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, is that the voices, for me, that was like a while ago, but that's what starts, imposter syndrome, where, you're in the middle of doing something and you're kind of like, wait a minute, I'm doing it, do I know what I'm doing? And, for years, I think it was like that. And I think for me, everything changed, like I said, the last year and a half. And you're right, surrounding yourself with the people that are doing the things that you want to do and also that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
for me, you use foundation, I use clarity. Clarity is the foundation of the work I do with all my clients. But I think for me, for courage to be possible, first, there has to be the dream. And a lot of people are so caught up in the how that they don't give themselves permission to dream. And I use the word permission a lot with my clients, and that's one of the things I write about, is giving yourself permission. So we need them to be able to live in the possible. What is the possible? I don't care about the path, right? I don't care. We're going to dream. If I took away every limitation, physical, financial, time, whatever that was, what is the dream? And that's one of the things that Rusty knows as a coach, we give them this safe place to be able to dream of what's possible. And then we can work the road backwards from there, right? But a lot of people have to give themselves permission to clear the path and dream. And once you do that, then the courage, is a byproduct of building that path to it.
Yeah.
Can I add on a piece to that? And
sure.
I think Alison here, we think very similarly, I can tell. You asked Deb, what is the first step? And so, Al, clearly a dream, and I'm 100% on board with that. But what is the step you need to take in order to come up with a dream? Because if I remember the days when I was working at Apple, and Apple's a great company. I was very happy working there, and I could have stayed there for a long time, but I wanted to do something else. And I remember printing out my resume and looking at it and saying, what can I do? Like, how can I leverage my experience to go do something else? And that question is not a good question to come up with a dream. Because as Alison was saying, you got to set aside all the constraints about what have you done before and what do you think is possible and how much money do you think you can make and what are people going to think, all of these constraints that we have in our head. So part of the dream is that safe environment. And so getting some space, putting yourself in the right mindset. And so I would encourage, find a podcast or a book. I wrote a book about this. I don't know if there's that books, but, read something, talk to somebody, listen to a podcast, watch a video, whatever, but put yourself in that mindset that gives you the space to think creatively. And even that takes some courage. You're like, well, I don't have time to do that. And what's the point? It's just a waste of time, right? We all have this inner chatter that tends to keep us where we are. So it takes some courage and a willingness to say, this is important to me. This is my life, and I'm going to do something with it.
Right. And, I'll add to that. I tell my clients, and people are like, well, you're a marketer, but I tell my clients, what's your why, right? Like, why are you doing this? And then what's your dream? Like, where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? Do you see yourself working 80 hours a week still, or do you see yourself, retired or whatever on a beach or, and I encourage them to do the same thing. And I find that probably 60% of the people that I talk to can't. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. It's like, no. But what, I try to take the restraints off, Alison, that you do, right? Like if there were no obstacles at all and you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would it be? And to get them there is just like, sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but when they get there, it's almost like the heavens open up and the angels start singing because they're like, oh my God, this is possible. I'm like, yes, this is possible.
And, to add to that, my first session with my clients, we build a detailed value map. Your values are your North Star. And when you live a life in alignment with your values, life works.
Yep.
It's courage to do that because
yes.
It's compromises, right? And the value map is different. Like all four of us might have a value of integrity, but what that means to each one of us. So we do these exercises and we're building out this value map, and they can really see how aligned or not aligned they are in their current life. And so then we start playing the and game, because everybody likes to think, well, if I have this value or this value, and it's like, let's play in the and. My favorite word as a coach, one of them is and, right? And so what if they both existed? What would that look like? What if they were both true? And so for some of our clients, some come with the dream, and some we have to give them the tools to help them learn how to dream again. It's a muscle they haven't exercised. Right. And so building a value map and creating the ands in that, we start teaching them to start doing it, and to give themselves permission to start thinking bigger. So it can be, some come with a big goal, others, we work with them iteratively. And as they release the shackles, whatever shackles that are holding them back, they're going to allow themselves to create that dream.
A lot of forward thinking and future thinking really starts with, is it yet? Because a lot of people will be in these either harried work situations or personal situations, and they've been on that a hamster wheel for such a long time where they can't stop. And sometimes it's the stop, that long pause. Sometimes the pause is longer than others, to be able to see that clarity, to be able to move forward. And I love your value map. I do everything with Deb: determine your mission, explore your options, brainstorm your path. Rusty, you have a philosophy as well, correct?
I do, yeah. It's actually tied to this idea of the title of my book is Breaking the Code. And it's based on this idea that we've all been programmed, right? We all have a set of beliefs about what's possible and our place in the world and so on. And if you want to reach a new level of success, you've got to break the code. You've got to break out of that old programming of who you've been. And set a goal for what it is that you actually want in the world, rather than what you think is possible. So, very much in line with everything everyone's been talking about.
Awesome. And Iris, what is your thinking in this philosophy realm?
I mean, I kind of feel, the way that Alison and Rusty feel. It's, I think that, I guess I could use myself as an example. Like you're talking about, dreaming and what everything looks like without the obstructions. And, for me, it's what I'm doing, And I guess my philosophy really, it's like, I just want to say, don't let life stop you. Life, I think a lot of times gets in the way. We're afraid that if we take a step, let's say my wife has a wonderful, income, and, I'm working at a job and I want to leave my job because I'm not happy where I am. So I'm doing what I'm doing. But people let life get in the way where, and I would talk to you guys about this. If you're living life a certain way and you see the golden key that you want to grab, do you let these things stop you, or do you push through? And it goes back to courage, I think, right? It's like we see these things that we want, but we're afraid to go for them because we've had limitations put on us. We've been told that this isn't how you succeed. You succeed, you go to school and you get a job at Apple and you stay at Apple, and right. And it's comfortable. And, Alison, you were in tech for, 30 years, and, you could have stayed in tech, and I was doing what I was doing. But I think everybody gets to a point, or people with the entrepreneurial spirit get to a point where we want to do something else, but life gets in the way. And I think that just don't let life get in the way. You can push through it. You can make things work. The obstacles can actually, instead of becoming obstacles, they can actually be stepping stones.
Don't let life get in the way. It's just such I'm goal setting simplified. It sounds really easy. It's not.
It's not. That's what I'm saying. There's obstacles. And I know that was a really long way of getting to where I wanted to go, but I just was trying to get clear on it. But when we have the obstacles, we can look at them as obstacles. We can look at them as walls, or we can look at them as stairs, right? So it's like steps to the next level. And that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. And life was going to get in the way, right? It's a matter of, get support, get help. And I'll use, I almost died. I was in and out of the hospital for months. I had to learn to walk again and a lot of things, kept major setbacks. I have an amazing partner. He made, the second day home with the walker, I threw out the walker and I said, a walker is not part of my story. Get rid of it. And I held on to him, and he, and I couldn't have physical therapy because it was COVID, and I would have died at that point because of my vulnerability. And I had a great partner who, when I didn't want to do it, made me go do it. I wanted my dog home, didn't let me get my dog back until I could walk around the block by myself as a motivation. Went back in the hospital multiple times, but I had a partner. I had a champion. I had somebody in my corner. I had a challenger. And I think this thing we do, especially as women, is we think we have to figure it all out ourselves, and we don't. We get to raise our hand and say, I need help. I need help defining it. I need help doing it. I need help getting accountability. I need help changing the narrative. And so courage, it takes courage to ask for help. This vulnerability is weakness was part of the culture that I was brought up with, right? And actually vulnerability takes courage to say, I need help.
Yeah.
I don't want to be where I want to be. I might not know where it is that I want to go. So courage is just admitting. Courage is being honest with yourself.
Well, when I scaled and I had my little meltdown and I realized that I needed help, I asked for it because I knew that I wouldn't get to that next level without help. And that was scary because, you're sitting there going, okay, I can't do this alone. And I'm somebody, and my wife will tell you, I do everything, right? Mm-hmm. So I just, push through it all. So it was really hard to say, okay, I'm here and I have no idea what I need. I have no idea what I need to do. Can somebody help me? And they did. And those were the hardest words I think I've ever said in my life to these group of women. It was daunting, but I had to do it or I wouldn't have gotten through.
And again, it goes back to, you can't reach your goals on your own. You need your people, whether it is for support, encouragement, tactical advice, or just to celebrate the good things so you keep moving forward. I put in the chat the Facebook group for Write On Online, which is my community for goal setting, productivity, but most importantly, community. And my favorite day of the week is Toot Your Horn Thursday, because people do not celebrate their wins enough. And I think doing that is also something that helps to build up that courage. When you've got people saying, wow, that's so awesome, you get to like store that fuel and help move forward. So let's talk about that power, the positivity, the uplifting, the keeping the courage going, because we're here, you're listening, you know that there's something that you want to change in your life. Great. Once we're on that path, how do we keep going?
I think when you get through it, you know that you can do it, right? When you get through it the first time, oh, that rhymed. I didn't mean that to rhyme.
Yeah, I was wondering if we were having
you can get through it, you can do it. We'll make a song out of it. But once you get through that first time, right? I think it gives you that, okay, I did that. I can do this. And then the next time it's like, oh, I did those two things. I can do this. So I think it's just like this forward momentum that you have. And it's also, I guess, just belief in yourself. I think after a while, when you do stuff, you just start knowing that you can get it done, and having a good support system. I'll go back to that, because, going back to what Rusty said, surrounding yourself, you're with the 5 people. My tribe is amazing. And so the people that I've surrounded myself with are my cheerleaders. They're like, okay, go, you got it. Now go to that next level. And we do the same for each other. So I think there's a few layers to it.
I think the other piece of it is setting yourself up for success. And the way we don't do that is because we make these big audacious goals, and we think we have to jump from floor 0 to floor 10 without taking the steps, up the other flights. And if you can break things into smaller bites, and then you can celebrate those bites along the way, you can do, like you said, Iris, which is build that muscle. And so you really need to set yourself up for success. Yes, it's a big goal, and it's maybe a long road, but we get to celebrate every step. But there's this misperception out there that it's like trying to lose 40 pounds. I can't celebrate that I lost 5. Yes, you can, right? Just because you haven't reached the big goal, you get to celebrate every step of the way. It doesn't take away your commitment, your focus, your desire, but we need to give ourselves back to permission to celebrate along the way, so that we can, and then to also look in the mirror and say, I did that. But they have your own people around you that say, yes, you did that. Keep going.
I love how you circled back to permission.
Yeah, I want to just add into that. Iris was talking about this, building confidence, because you've done it before. And I think that there's another level of confidence, which is even if you haven't done the thing before, that you're going to figure it out in some way, right? And it doesn't even have to be you figuring it out, but you're resourceful. You're going to come up with a plan. You're going to be able to handle whatever it is that comes up. And that is a belief, not necessarily in your capabilities, as I've done this before and I've, check. I've had this experience, but whatever it is that comes up, I'm resourceful and I'll be able to figure it out, and it's going to work out. It's going to be okay.
Right. And my wife calls me the planner of plans.
Yeah. Well, it's the planner of plans, but it's also just this broader understanding of unless we're talking about, jumping off of a tall building and trying to land on your feet or something, unless you're talking about a mortally dangerous act,
right.
And for the most part, we're not talking about those things, right? We're talking about changing careers. We're talking about going for promotion. Iris, a great example of scaling your business. Oh my God, how am I going to do this? Right? It's these kinds of things. You're not going to die doing these things, right? And so if you can build this ability that's okay, I'm going to land on my feet somehow. I don't really know how. I don't know how it's going to work out, but it's going to work out in some way, and it's going to be okay. That to me is this kind of belief that somehow it's going to work out. And I will add on, I want to come back to this, and I want to kind of piggyback on something that was brought up earlier, which is this idea of asking for help. And Alison, you said it's hard for women to ask for help, and men don't want to ask directions when they get lost.
Right.
I was stereotypical. We don't like to ask for help, and so I don't think it's a gender thing. I think it's it's universal.
I think it's hard to ask.
the willingness to ask for help or support, or can I bounce something off of you? Or, it's like, and having those people who believe in you and are going to tell you like, yeah, of course, you don't know how it's going to work out, but you're going to find you'll figure it out. You're a smart, capable person. You're resourceful. It's going to work out. Having that sense of belief beyond the details, right? Beyond I can give you the plan on all the 7 things that are going to happen and what the result is going to be. Even if you don't know the 7 things, it's still going to work out. And that kind of belief is often is very well supported by the people around you.
Right.
Maybe think of 2 things. Before we had like the whole internet, when I would be scared of something, I would be like, well, what's the worst that they're going to happen? No one's going to put a billboard on Times Square that said Alison tried and failed, right? Now it would be a viral tweet or whatever, viral X or whatever it is these days, right? And so you think about that. And the other thing for me, which you said that triggered, is I was on another podcast and the title was a line I said, I'll always bet on me. Right. And, I quit my job with no plan. I mean, I knew coaching was part of it, but my body, it was just done. I was done with that journey. And, but I knew I'd be okay. And when I struggled, my mom's like, you can always go back and get a corporate job. I said, I'll drive an Uber, but I'm not going back to that. Right. And because I know I'll figure it out. And I was having a discussion about something in a disagreement when I was healing, and I just wanted to go get help. I didn't want help. And we were having a little disagreement about it. And I was like, well, I'll just go home and figure it out. And it's like, well, how will you do that? Well, I'm Alison. I always figure it out. It's that belief that I have that inside of me. And again, we all have that in one parts of our life. And then there's other parts of our lives that the fear shows up, right? So it's not like you're universally brave all the time. It's that there are situations where I'll always bet on me. Jokingly, Annie introduced us because I shark dive. That doesn't take courage, because I go with really smart people with plans that I've researched, and it's very coordinated, even though I've dove with some of the most deadly types of sharks, because we plan it, right? So that doesn't take courage to me. Courage is really finding that thing inside of yourself that you didn't know was there, that you need to find to be able to get forward. Now to somebody else, shark diving may take courage. Right. So we can't, what takes courage for us might not be for somebody else. And for what gets in our way is different for every person as well.
I think you're right.
I cannot personally see myself shark diving or bungee jumping, but I did pack up my car and move cross country. So, courage is different for everybody in different stages of our lives. I want to just call back to something you said a few minutes ago, Alison. You get to celebrate every step of the way. Mm-hmm. I think and I was speaking to a group last week. I was doing one of my Deb sessions, and I said, what if you have trouble getting motivated to do things? And I said, well, think about it as you get to do the things. So get to celebrate, get to take these steps toward having the life you want. When you think about it as a joy, a pleasure, that's another mindset, mind frame thing to consider.
Right. You get to that next level, and you get to, that's really good. Yeah. I like that a lot.
I'll just give you a simple example of that, which was about a month ago. I did a running race, and it was the longest I've ever run in my life. It was 13 miles, a half marathon. I've never run that long before. And my son is a huge runner. And so on the way to the race, I'm talking about how fast I want to run and all that. And he basically talks me up to the next fastest group. So, I planned to run with this group, and now I'm running with this group. Hadn't planned for it, hadn't trained for it, any of that stuff. And so, predictably halfway through the race, I'm like, okay, this is really hard. And I realized in that moment, I was like, okay, well, I have 2 choices here. I can just sit here and just focus on how hard it is and go through the mental struggle of, why am I doing this? I don't need to run this fast. I can slow down. It's like, I could do all that. Or I could just, as you were saying earlier, I could just recognize, well, I get to do this. Right. And it doesn't make it easier. I'm not saying the pain and the discomfort goes away. It doesn't. But the mental pain goes away because I'm not so honed in on, oh my God, this stinks, I'm just dying here. Instead, I'm focused on, okay, this is kind of cool. There's other people around me. There's support. I passed someone who's cheering. They gave me a cup of water. There's a lot of things that I can recognize that are good. And by the way, I just ran 7 miles at this faster pace. That's pretty good. So it's like
you're angling for one of these, right? Gold Strike.
Totally. Yeah, but you can
Nice.
give them to yourself. And I guess that's the point is, it's like, it doesn't so much of it is the mental game more than what's actually going on.
I remember
you the perspective that you take with you on things. That's something that I work on with my clients, right? Is you get to choose that perspective. It could be the pain perspective. It could be the opportunity perspective. It could be the excitement perspective. It could be, impacting the world perspective. You get to choose the perspective that you want to go forward on, and whatever is going to be best for you. It's not always the good, it could be the pain. Maybe you're motivated by pain. Maybe you're like, I want to conquer this pain. But we get to make intentional choices. So permission and intentional choices are my big buzz things with my clients, right? And you get to make intentional choices, and that you made the intentional choice to celebrate what you were doing versus focus on the pain. And when we start making more intentional choices and how we look at things and how we respond to things, we don't need as much courage to move forward.
So years ago, we were singing, I'm a singer, and we were singing at this benefit, and there were 5,000 people there. And I didn't know there was going to be 5,000 people there. And the band didn't tell me there were going to be 5,000 people there because they knew I would freak out. So we're backstage, and my bass player goes, there's 5,000 people out there. And I went, what are you talking about? And I took a peek, outside the curtain, and I ran back into the green room, and I threw up. And I was like, oh my God, that's 5,000 people. And then it completely switched in my head. And I was like, that's 5,000 people that I'm going to be singing in front of. Holy crap. And it turned into this like really cool thing. For me, it's, if I get out in front of an audience, it's like getting through the first line. And I know that, I have the audience and I'm comfortable. It took 2 lines because it was like 5,000 people. And I focused on the first, 3 rows, but it was the most amazing thing because, part of me was like, I can't do this. And if I wouldn't have done it, then I wouldn't have sang in front of 5,000 people. But I kind of like what you said, I get to do this. And it was amazing.
One thing I want to make sure that we address, and you kind of leaned into this a little bit, Iris, is the personal aspect. We're talking a lot about courage in business, but let's face it, everything is intertwined. So do you each have a philosophy or a tip for people? Because sometimes it's easier to have courage in work than it is in making changes to your personal life. So thoughts, Rusty?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of things come to mind, but one that I'll share is oftentimes around personal things, we tend to think of decisions as binary, like it's either this or that. And we tend to also think of them as absolute, like once I've made this decision, there's no going back. And those two things are oftentimes not true. Oftentimes there's a lot of ways to explore around the edges to kind of try to test something out. One of the philosophies that I've talked about with people is if you've got a conversation to bring up or you're wanting to deepen a relationship with somebody, try the 10% rule, which is, if you've got this much to talk about, carve out 10% of it and share that and see how it goes. And if it goes well, great, then you can increase that. You can share more of what it is that you want to talk about. But if it doesn't go well, then maybe that's not the right person or they're not the right situation to have that conversation. So that's just a tool you can use around this idea of it's often not binary. It's often not this or that, but there's a lot of gray area, and to see where you can kind of play around the edges and get to start to build some confidence around a decision or a direction.
And it can be this and that. It doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be or. Yeah.
My favorite word, and.
And yes, and.
Yes, and yes.
Yeah, I think for me in the personal, I coach the whole person. I'm an executive coach. I'm a life coach. I'm coaching the whole person, and how they show up in one aspect of their life is often how they show up in all aspects of their life. And so you are looking for trends. Now, there might be certain things like I will take a backpack and go to a third world country by myself. But when I was single, walk up and talk to a cute guy would scare the heck out of me. Right. So different situations, are situational, but the person is a whole person. One of the best days of my career was when I realized I was trying to be a different person outside of work and inside of work because of this expectation of who I was supposed to be. And when I decided to be a unified person in all aspects of my life, I was much happier. So I don't know if, in courage in your personal life, it's the same thing. What is the dream? What is the goal? What's in the way? What are the stories that you need to break through? And what are the steps? First step, who's supporting you? Who's your champion? Who's your challenger? Who's going to hold your hand and jump off the cliff with you, right? I mean, who's your ride or die? It just, all you're doing is you're moving it geographically from the office to personal, but we are a whole person.
We are a whole person.
Yeah.
I'm completely with you, because that's one of my things as well. I said it before, your personal life impacts your professional life. Your professional life impacts your personal life. And the more that you could be you in both, the better of a you you're going to be.
Well, that's it. I think you just bring your authentic self into everything that you do. And that can be scary. I told you I had a coach years ago, you guys are going to cringe, so get ready, who told me to be less me. Because I was too, I was a New Yorker in Indiana, and, and I mean, I fired him 8 months later, but
it took 8 months.
It took 8 months because I'm in Indiana and I was trying to make sales, and I didn't want to go against the grain. So I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I'm a little too intense, maybe a little whatever. But then when I realized, when I had time to think about it, I was getting clients, but I wasn't getting the right clients, because when the real Iris came out, they were like, holy crap, who's that? So now, I just show up authentic. Everybody knows, who I am, what my values are. Do they align with my values? If they don't align my values, I don't work with them. If they don't align with my values, I'm not friends with them. So there's a whole thing there. But, you talk about, fear in your personal life. I think we all come against different things. The scariest thing I ever did was propose to my wife.
And it worked out. There you go.
It worked out great. But those 2 seconds that I was waiting for her to say yes, because she waited on purpose, was probably the longest 2 seconds of my life. But, I think we all face different challenges, and I think it's how we face them, right? I think it's, do we look at them as challenges, or do we look at them as opportunities? Because I think, each challenge, and also, do we make mistakes, or do we learn lessons? I think we learn lessons, because if we learn from something that we've done, it's not a mistake. It's a lesson. So I think it's just giving ourselves more grace and treating ourselves as we would our best friend, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so this is the point in the conversation where I would love for each of you to gift a goal to the audience. So what is something that they could do today, tonight, tomorrow to get better at having courage? It sounds like a really funny way to phrase it, but that's it, to do what you need to do to be able to face the things that you need to face to get into that sphere of a better life. So Alison, you want to start us out with a goal?
Sure. I think for me, it's got to start with the dream, right? And it's got to start with sitting down someplace quiet and figuring out what is it you want. But it doesn't end there, right? It's not just what you want. Why? Why is it important to you, right? What will it mean to you, to your physical health, to your mental health, your financial health, your spiritual health? What would it mean to the people in your life? What would it mean to the world if you have even grander goals, right? So just sit down and say, why is this goal important? And when the why becomes so powerful, it starts to pull. And so the courage is not as much of a fight. It becomes a little bit of a magnet. So to find some quiet spot and give yourself permission to say, I'm just going to pretend that I don't have to figure it out. What's the dream? Why is it important to me, to my family, to my friends, to the world? And just be with that right now. That's where I would start.
And again, the D is determine your mission for a reason. It's not just about getting to this better life, which of course you want, but what is the impetus behind it because as you push yourself forward, as you help others, everybody wins. Everybody gets to win, right?
Yes, we all win when we all win. That's one of my things, right? I felt like I lived in a world in tech where it was like there was only room for one person on the mountaintop. And I'm like, yes, there's a plateau up there. I might get up there first, but I'm going to pull you all up there with me. And there's room for all of us to dance on the top. And my why I mentioned at the beginning, my journey would have been a lot easier if I had somebody along for the ride. It was to celebrate with me, but also to call me out. Right. And so my why is I don't want anybody else to feel like I felt on that journey. And if I can take that away and make it so they are in flow and not fight in their career, how lucky am I that I get to be a witness on that and on that journey with them. And so I'm very clear on that. And when the business, I had to shut everything down with my health and rebuild it. And, when you want to give up, I have to remind myself of that mission, right? When you're having a bad month and the leads aren't coming in or whatever that is, right? Or that thing you created fell flat or whatever that is, right? And you go back to your why and it's like, but these people out there, they need you. They need you to be in their corner. They need you. And that helps you find the courage to keep going. So the big why is, and for anybody out there, if you've never watched Simon Sinek's YouTube about why, he wrote the book on finding your why. I highly recommend it because when you know your why, again, it creates a pull, and that pull is a great start.
Absolutely. So, Iris, goal?
I muted myself because the dogs were barking. A goal for some, I think that kind of, I'm going to go with Alice because I was going to say your why. What is your why? And is it okay? So what is your why? How do you want to set that goal for yourself? And instead of making it, I'm going to challenge somebody, right? Instead of making it so big, like we said earlier, do it in little chunks. Set your goal, look at it, but instead of making it so intimidating to yourself, just like, how do you eat a really big steak? One bite at a time.
Right. Or an elephant, depending on.
I didn't want to say elephant. I love animals. I did that on purpose, Deb. You missed the cue. But yeah, although a steak is technically an animal, it's a cook. Okay, never mind.
Well, I did not want to correct you when you said elephants are an animal. Eat a steak.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I know.
Rusty.
I try to separate it, but anyway, that's another story. But
no elephants were harmed in the process.
No
of
elephants.
Conversation.
No. A couple of cows might have been. Sorry. Go ahead.
So, the word that comes to mind is everybody's favorite word since the pandemic, which is Zoom, but not Zoom in the talking to someone else standpoint, but zoom out. I'm so go back to this running example I gave earlier. It's so easy to zoom in on the problems and the difficulties and the obstacles and the barriers. And Alison was talking about perspective, and zooming out is just a shift in perspective. Because we all tend to get very focused on what's going on in our life in this moment, right? In this day and this stressful meeting that I've got with my boss or, whatever it is. And zoom out, because zooming out really gives you the ability to make a decision based on a much broader perspective, right? How important is what's going on right this moment in the context of this year or in the context of this phase of my life, right? I was talking to someone earlier who has 2 young kids and is working. It's like, well, that's a phase of your life. And I'm in a different phase of my life as my son is about to go off to college. So that's a different phase. So everyone's in different phases of life. So zoom way out. And when I'm talking about zooming out, zoom way out, right? Because as you start to understand what's going on in this phase of my life, in my career as a whole, what's important to me? What do I want to accomplish? What would be a successful, meaningful career? What will be a successful and meaningful life? So zooming out in that way really helps to lower the stakes. It helps you to understand, well, what's happening in this very moment is just part of something that's much bigger that's going on in your life as a whole. And it can just help if that can help, that change in perspective can help give you the courage or reduce the fears that are standing in your way.
Awesome. Love it. So we want to take some time to dream. We want to figure out the why, and we want to step way back to look at the big picture to see what is actually possible. And let's face it, most things are. What is that quote? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Henry Ford. Yeah.
Right. So why not be right? What a wonderful conversation on courage. Friends, where can people learn more about you? Alison?
Well, the best way to learn about me is actually my LinkedIn, because I put content out there. I post a bi-weekly newsletter called What's Next, Pivot or Promotion, which I help a lot of people figure out what's next in their career, whether they've hit this plateau and ready to change or they want to get promoted. I'm the creator of the Executive Promotion Readiness Assessment. So if you want to get to the VP, EVP, or C-suite, you go to Dare2Be with the number 2, and you can look at where your skills are for that. So LinkedIn, subscribe to my newsletter, or if a promotion's in your future in the next year or two, Dare2Be
Excellent. And all of the links and your LinkedIn profiles will be in the recap at thedebmethod.com/blog. Rusty, where can people learn more about you?
The 2 easiest ways are my website is rustygaillard.com, and also on LinkedIn. Like Alison, I'm on LinkedIn regularly, post a lot of content there, and love to connect with people. So if you connect with me, mention that you saw me here, because I get a lot of connection requests and a lot of them are spam, and I don't want you to be one of those guys who just gets rejected.
Awesome. Love it. And Iris, where can people learn more about you?
Oh, a couple of places. So LinkedIn as well. And same thing that Rusty said. If you're going to connect with me there, let me know that you could found me here, because we all get a lot of spam. My website, GasStoveCreative.com, and I have a podcast. GasStoveCreative.com presents the cookbook recipes for business and marketing success. So you can check me out all the places.
Excellent. And again, I am at the Deb Method everywhere, and you can go to thedebmethod.com/blog for the recaps and the links to this and all the previous shows. And I am live every Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And every Thursday, new episodes, and yes, it is the audio version of this, are on the Deb Show podcast on the Marketing Podcast Network. So subscribe at your favorite place to get your podcasts. And you can learn more about me at thedebmethod.com. Well, what a fun, wonderful, encouraging. First of all, I love lots of things about my show, but one is to bring people together who have either never met or don't know each other and maybe in a similar space, but to have this kind of spirited, encouraging conversation. Let's face it, courage is a serious topic. And I just love that we were able to approach it with such encouragement and fun, because it goes back to, you get to do the things, you get to live the life you want. Might as well enjoy it. So before we wrap, friends, I'd love for you all to just leave everybody with one thing. So if people get one thing from this conversation, what do you want that to be? Alison.
What would change in your life if you gave yourself permission to have what you want?
Love it. And Rusty.
Feeling nervous or afraid is not a bad sign. It's a sign that you're going in a good direction. So go for it.
Ooh, being nervous or afraid is good. Embrace it. And Iris.
I'm going to say, if you want it, just do it. Get through it and do it.
Get through it and do it, because it starts with a choice, right? You're here, you're watching, or you're listening because you know that is something that you want something to change. Well, we're giving you permission. You need to give it to yourself, but you don't need to, because we all did, right? But this is the point. It is your life. It is your choice. So thank you all, my wonderful guests, Rusty, Alison, and Iris. And thank you all for tuning in. Go on out there, go for it, have that courage, because we know you can do it.